And I have one big topic I want to talk about, and then I need to go rest my voice before our next stream. And this is something that I was thinking about with At the Gates that came out. Did you follow anything with At the Gates, Rob?
Nope.
Okay. Well, At the Gates is the latest game, or the next game from John Schaefer. He's been, again, working on this for like 5-6 years now. Having a major burnout, almost, serious health issues for developing the game. And it was finally released this past week, and it's gotten very polarizing opinions from people. A lot of people aren't liking it due to missing UI features, missing content, and other people like myself are enjoying it for just how different it is compared to other 4X games on the market, which was pretty much John's goal from the beginning, was to create a different kind of 4X game. But with that said, though, a lot of people complain that there is no real diplomacy, because that's the always a problem when it comes to 4X style games. But the issue is that he's already talked about breaking down, he's already put down a roadmap for what's going to be coming in the next, I think, 3 months. He's going to be working on post-release support and adding in more of that content. But while people weren't expecting multiplayer, it raises that very tricky topic of knowing how much do you put into the release of a game with or without the knowledge of continuing to work on it in the future. Because as you're aware, Rob, and as our audience is aware, many games these days get post-release support. Some games are built entirely around that, such as lifestyle games, the games we mentioned in the first part, like, Dead by Daylight. I'm sure Anthem's going to be getting plenty of post-release support, etc., etc. But then there are games that are released, and then the developer kind of has to figure out what to go from there on. And it can become very hard sometimes to know just how much you want to put into it, and more importantly, when is your game considered, I guess, quote-unquote, feature complete? Once again, while we were playing a Souls-like game last night, we got into a whole discussion about marketing and trying to live as an independent developer. So I had to balance talking about the lifestyle and philosophy with playing a Dark Souls-style game as well, which is always fun to do. There's some multitasking for you. Yeah. But it's very hard for these updates to know just how much they will really matter, and even if you want to pursue that route, I suppose you just keep working on your game, because as we said, there is no such thing as that perfect game that you got 100% everything in it, it's done, it's bug free, you'll release it at 1.0, nobody will ever have a problem with it. I'm sure, Rob, as someone who does video game producing, you've probably run into many of perfect games, right?
Yeah, no, we certainly, they're always perfect. Every time, right when we release, we're always like, you know what? We're good with this. It's perfect. No one's ever going to complain.
I can see like the 2K rep out of the corner of the eye, aiming like the laser sight at you right now. You're saying that. Everything is fine.
But that's the, for a AAA studio, it's a lot easier to say that, because as a consumer, if especially in a series, you're like, okay, I know what I'm going to get, and I know that they're going to keep working on this. They've got the resources, they're not going to give up on it. But for an indie dev, like, you're going into this pretty weird space. A game is never done, especially these days. You always, every month, you're going to come up with some new thing you want to add, and you're going to change your priorities and all that stuff. And I feel like when it comes down to being an indie developer, or even a mid-sized developer, a AAA developer has a pretty good concept of what they want to make. And usually stuff that happens afterwards is not due to just completely unhinged feature creep and a lack of priorities or prioritizations. If that happens, it's usually a mess of like conflicting opinions and a million different people being in charge of the project over time. But for mid-size and indie developers, it's difficult to keep your feature list solid and unchanging over the course of your development cycle. I feel like for a game like At the Gates, it sounded like there was a lot of hopes put on something that weren't, and it wasn't well communicated what was actually going to come out. and that's a problem. The only way to sell a game when you're an indie developer is to have a really good communication and a really good interaction with your audience, and get them to trust you and make sure that you can maintain that trust. If you keep switching up your feature set, if you keep switching up your goals and your priorities, not only are you ostensibly lying to your fans, your potential fans, but you're doing a disservice to yourself in the fact that you're probably going to keep pushing out your dates, which happens all the time. So, and that'll drive you crazy. It sounds like the story of John Schaefer here is that he's done a little bit of that.
Yeah. And
go ahead. Sorry.
I was about to say, and from watching and reading a lot of his developer logs, he ran into problems with trying to get the game finished. Like, what happens when your first idea doesn't work? Well, then I have to go build a second one. That takes more time and money. But what happens when that second idea doesn't work? Now, as you said, for most of the AAA side, you have a relatively good idea, beginning to end, what this game is going to look like. Obviously, things can change and stuff like that, but it's very rare for, a AAA game to get like 50 to 75% of the way done. Somebody goes, uh-oh, we have no idea how to finish this game. Like, that kind of stuff usually gets caught very early, and there's still going to be a finished game at the end of it.
Yeah, I know, weirdly, personally, the way I like to work is I like to come up with something and just iterate on it nonstop, and it'll grow unto itself. Like, I'm very bad about, personally, if I have a project I'm doing, I'm very bad about planning out the final structure. I'm very good about making something and then making it better and better and better and better. But if I were to become an indie developer who wants to be successful, I would not be able to do it that way. You really have to have a lot of willpower. You really have to maintain yourself to a specific feature set as best you can. And if that first try doesn't work, you don't scrap the whole thing. If you can help it, you just kind of guide it towards where you need it to be, because that's a lot of work you have to throw away, and you don't want to do that. But you have to have a pretty solid goal, and you have to strive for that goal specifically, because that allows you to communicate with your audience. It allows you to fulfill your promises. And once you get to that final point, which is it should be months before launch, then you can start cobbling together your post-release plans and getting people excited about that. But before you launch, you should have a pretty solid idea of what you're getting into, and not make a lot of changes to your direction along the way, because that's just going to hurt everybody, and you're going to launch with terrible reviews, if not terrible sales. And I've been on the ends of both types of projects that are well conceived and well directed and launch positively, and projects that go that opposite route of changing all the time, and then reaching a point where it's just kind of too late to do anything, and you just got to either get it out or never launch it at all. So yeah, I've been on both sides. It's not a lot of fun to be on the opposite side of things not going well. But hey, if you've been in the business this long and working in many different things as I've been, and a lot of people I know have been, you're going to run into some lemons, and not even bad games, just bad project direction. That's all.
Yeah, and it's just very hard, as you said, to know exactly how a project's going to end up. Like, with my second book right now that I'm working on, the very first thing I did was just come up with like all the chapter titles to try and have some semblance of a game plan. But I've already, restructured and shuffled everything around at least 3 or 4 times, and right now the book is halfway done. I'm still not sure how much longer it's going to be. But it's so important to have at least some measure of, what is considered end game for you. Because as you said, you can just keep working on a game forever and ever and ever, and then who's that going to help?
Yeah, and there's draw in it. Like, for me, I've always thought to myself, like, if I wanted to make my own games, I basically have to do it as a hobby and not as a profession, because I just don't have. That's just not how I think. When I'm running my own project. Now, if I'm running a project in a larger company, well, I have resources, and those resources are limited, and we have deadlines, and those deadlines are unwavering, and you just kind of you're forced to do it. But when there's more leeway, when there's more flexibility in the project, it becomes a lot harder to to not want to make all those changes. And you see it all the time in the AAA business, for those companies that can afford that luxury. Oh, we're going to push out this game by 2 years because it's just not meeting, like the Nintendo thing. We're pushing it out several years because it just wasn't meeting our standards, and we just got to scrap it and start over. Like when you have that leeway, it's nice. When you have that luxury of money and resources that are endless, you can constantly staple things on and change them up. But
that's the perfect world analogy. In the perfect world, you can work on a game for as many years as you like, and there will be no consequences for it. But as I'm sure any indie developers watching this right now, we don't live in that perfect world. And even Blizzard seems to have been kicked out of their own perfect world. That's what we've been hearing about with Activision putting more of a chokehold on them over these last few months.
Yeah, a team that's determined and has a high amount of willpower can accomplish quite a bit of things, including knocking someone off of their tower. Whether it be an awesome battle royale game or just that one game where you're trying to kill the the giant killer. That's what you have to do. You have to just focus all your resources and make sure you know what your game plan is, and that's how you do it. You just execute what you want to execute. And then with a little bit of luck, that's a good formula for success. It's not guaranteed success, but it's the only way you can be confident that you're going out with your best foot forward.
Yeah, and the other point about this I wanted to bring up is that I've been replaying Cultist Simulator as well. That's another game that came out, and it has its own very interesting design to it and its own philosophy. And the thing that is annoying me about the game is that there are still elements in that game that are literally unfinished. And it's hard to explain the rules if you haven't played the game, but as a quick, a Cliff's Notes version. You get these little cards, and the cards can be used in various tasks that you have on the board. So there's 2 cards that you get in the game pretty much just by playing through it that are supposed to have functionality built into them that still aren't in the game yet. And Alexis Kennedy, who's developed the game, he has said that it is going to be in the game at some point. And the game is perfectly playable without it. But it's still very weird when this card appears in your game and I can't do everything with it, or it has no functionality. And it's one of those, and here's like the big question for you, Rob, and for the audience as well. Are you more accepting if a game has features cut from it, like the game is smaller but it's complete, or if you have a larger game but there's content in it that has been purposely or without malice still left in to be developed further?
I would say the former is a lot more acceptable. I want to mention to Board Fan, there is a difference between having to understand technology and overcome technological limitations to execute your plan, and the actual changing of feature creep and that kind of thing. It's perfectly acceptable to struggle through challenges and still meet your own personal goals, as opposed to imposing new features on yourself towards the middle or even end of the project. So I feel like that's totally fine to have your first prototype take a lot longer than you wanted because of having to learn a new tool set or language. So that's fine. It's the other stuff that's tough, and having a feature in your game that can't be 100% used because the feature's incomplete, that seems almost, I mean, without being hyperbolic, it seems almost inexcusable, because you're dangling a carrot in front of someone saying, hey, this will be useful at some point, just stay tuned. As opposed to, here's a game, you bought it and paid for, and you know what, you can even turn that into a bit of a bonus on your side as the developer, and saying, well, now I have additional content you can download and buy, some DLC for you. So, there's added value to someone being able to buy DLC for your game, as opposed to just giving them, it's like the hotel I stayed at when I was in India one time, where the 3rd floor was still being built when I was there. It does not give you a lot of confidence to be in a building that's still its structure is still being added to. So it's similar with a game. You know, when you're playing, you just get that feeling like the developer just kind of left you hanging. Especially when it's that in your face. If it's a deck building game or whatever, and you have a card that's not fully functional, it's like a wasted turn. You know, it's a card you want to throw away. So.
Yeah, and I think I'm the same as Board Fan there. That I'd rather play something that is complete and that grows from there, as opposed to playing something that I need to come back to because it's missing good content or missing even just functional content.
Yeah. And I just saw Mike's comment earlier about it worth putting it on Steam. It's no longer, you know, the same conversation, but that's a good question to ask no matter what you're doing. Like when we look through our weird games segment, how many of those games are even worth being in that early access area? Not very many of them. I'll be honest, and that's part of the problem that Steam has had, is that there's just so much stuff clouding the system. So many games that are not even, like, you can't really even call them a project because that's how little work has gone into them. They're a concept at best, and a single picture at worst. You know. Or just a picture to explain an idea. It's kind of the mess with the industry, and delivering a completed project is becoming a lost art, which is so weird to say, given our lives that were built out of hard media that had to be complete, or else that was, you know, there was why sell it, because you can't add on to it or fix it later.
Yeah. And yeah, Seem to Reg that's a topic in of itself for another time. But yeah, it definitely caused some issues in terms of quality control. And again, being able to put anything you want on a store, I think, is kind of a bad idea. Not just in terms of content, as we talk about with our weird games, but again, like, you shouldn't put on a major store, you know, Alpha 2 of your video game and try and selling it for $10 to $15. And as we said, like, you can promise anything to someone. You can say on your page that, oh, this game will be finished in 2035. Again, how's that helping anybody?
Yeah, and you can even say it's going to be finished in 6 months, with, like, whether you're just ambitious or lying. That's every bit as bad. You know, it's helping nobody, and in fact, it's a worse in that you're giving out false promises, getting people psyched up for a game that's never going to launch. You know, it's bad for the store, it's bad for the community, it's bad for you as a developer. I've had my share of messing around with like a text adventure editor that I would keep posting a project to and just completely not ruining the store, but basically using it as my own little test engine, and that's just bad form. I do not recommend doing that.
Yep, and like with something like with Cultist Simulator or At the Gates, again, it's very hard, like when you have these games that are built on so many little systems, to know exactly what is considered, I guess, mission critical for the game to be released. Like, we talked about this with, what was it? I think Battle Brothers, when I spoke with the developer of that game. I remember him saying that they came up with like an entire list of everything that they need to add or fix in the game, and they organize it again by what is critical. You know, like, make sure the game doesn't blow up your computer. Yeah, we need to get that fixed. But something like allow people to choose the color of their tunic. Yeah, like, that's not exactly going to kill the game. And it's very easy for all these little things to start being considered I guess, inconsequential to the experience. But when we talk about games like Cultist Simulator At the Gates, and there's so many elements moving around there, it's hard to know, I guess, when your game is considered, like, I don't want to use the term stable, but I guess consider, I guess, worth the purchase at that time. And I want to follow up on that point in a second, but I'll let you say your thoughts first, Rob.
Oh, I mean, it's true. Like, you do want to make sure your game is what I would call feature complete and certainly polished. I mean, all bugs fixed is like impossible. That's never been done in the history of man that I know of. But you strive towards that goal. You strive towards making a nice, complete, polished title, and that is what you want to do. That is what you should want to do anyway. And even when you get to a point where you can enter an early access or alpha or stage, you should be, quote, feature complete with only polish being added at that point, which is to say you have a fully playable game that still has bugs in it, but you're not going to be adding any new features at that point. That's what you should have.
Yeah. But that also raises, again, the issue when it comes to games as a service and post-release support. That you can release a game at $5, and then you could spend the next 6 months to a year creating multiple pieces of DLC and content, and, like, is that game still worth that value? Is it worth more? And in many cases, like, this is that problem, that you release a game and it may not be worth the price tag that you set it for yet. But how many people are going to stick around for 4 months, a year, maybe even more than that, until they get a point where we can say that the game is now worth that price?
Yeah, that's what I feel bad about the project No Man's Sky, because by all rights, it should have failed. Like, with its horrible reviews, with its poorly promised launch and all that stuff, and it became massively successful despite all that. Like, that to me is an example of a game that just tells developers, you know what, it's okay to launch with incomplete stuff and not fulfilling your promises, and still charge a premium price for it, and you'll be fine. You'll make millions of dollars even after all of that. And that is the one example that I can point to of that actually working out just fine. It's very rare that that'll happen. Like, it's insanely rare, and it's bad form to release something like that to the public.
Oh yeah. And again, like, and this is something that we hear about with, like, Sea of Thieves and another game called Atlas, that they release these games and it's still missing a lot of features. Some that were explained or advertised, other times it's just stuff that the game just seems to be lacking. And yeah, this is the weird thing about what we're seeing today. Like, like the people celebrating games that go on long enough to course correct like that. And this is a very interesting point that on one of the forums I was reading last night, someone made a forum, like a poll. Like, are you more forgiving of independent developers compared to AAA these days? And for me, I'm becoming more and more critical even of independent developers. Because it's kind of like the craft of game design has evolved to the point where a lot of the mistakes that we see should not still be happening, I think. And I guess, what do you think about that, Rob?
I think I guess what I would say is I'm less splitting hairs between indies and like AAA studios, and more about the price of the game. Like, for me, it's about value, So if I pay $5 for a game, I expect it to either be old or small, but not something that is not fun to play. Every game should be fun to play and be polished enough to be complete. Like, I'm not paying for like the completion of the game. I'm just playing for how fun it is, and how much I'm going to enjoy that game. For $5, I'm expecting, maybe an hour or two of play and just enjoy it, and it's still fun, But for a $60 game, I expect like almost like days of uninterrupted content that doesn't repeat, and just endless different play modes and stuff. Like, that comparatively is a lot of money to give up. Like, if I bought 12 $5 games, I should have about the same experience, like in terms of content. I should have apparently the same, or approximately the same. I can't speak anymore. Approximately the same amount of content as a $60 game, which is to say quite a bit. And like I mentioned a little bit, is that age can also determine it. Like, an older game certainly should be worth less because it's just not as polished, and it's kind of past its prime and all that stuff. But you still expect some value for that money, and to forgive an indie game for having a sloppy $5 title that comes out and it's not finished and it doesn't hit all its promises, it's still a little bit unforgivable, So I guess it's really about money for me, and less about who the developer is. Because as a consumer, I don't care. I don't care whose name is behind the title. I just care whether or not I like it.
Yep, and you're not the only one like that, Rob. There are plenty of consumers out there, again, as we've said, they don't know who's making the video game. Do you think they care that developers spent 2 months or 20 years trying to make a single game? No, they don't. All they see is that finished product. And when they see that finished product, like we said in the earlier on our stream, they expect it to be of quality. They expect, if I'm spending $15, $60, $2, whatever, if I'm spending money on your game, I expect it to be reasonably working. You're not going to spend $5 on a game and have a crippling bug in it. And there was a game on Steam. I think it was like a city builder game. I forget the name of that I was interested in. And people were still saying that even months after the game was released, there were still game-breaking bugs in it. I'm talking about a bug that prevents you from completing a mission. And developers said they don't have enough money to finish working on that. But again, it raises that point that if you release a prog and there's something that's causing that game to be unplayable, part of me thinks you still have to finish that. Am I expecting you to work on the game for free for a year and release more content? No. But I expect if I buy your game, that I shouldn't have to worry about the game, losing my save or corrupting it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's terrible. I do remember back in the day, I think it was the early 2000s, I bought an Xbox title, and I forget the name of the game, but I got to the first save point, and it basically ruined my save, and I lost an hour plus of play, and I never played it again. And that's something I would totally expect to be fixed in this day and age. To go back up and comment on Mike, and then before that, Mojo's comment, they're kind of in opposite directions, but the AAA studio, yes, they're expecting you to pay all the time.
Oh, yes.
And certainly there's reasons for that, a lot of which can just be given to marketing, like their marketing departments and whatnot. But then to Mike's point, yes, I care about the indie dev. I don't buy crap, though, but that's certainly a truism for a lot of fans. You want to give the indie developer a little bit more leeway. You want to support the indie developer, but you do still expect some quality there. You expect them to respect you as much as you are trying to respect them. And board fans comment, if they don't have the money, how are they supposed to fix it? I guess that the expectation comes, they should have planned for that ahead of time. If they launch with the bug, it's kind of on them. It's not on the consumer there, I would say.
And I think what you just said there, Rob, is a really good point about the respect between the consumer and the developer. It is a two-way street. I think it's very important. Again, we've spoken about this before, about kind of that unwritten contract between developer and the consumer. That as a developer, you have to release a product that works. You can't put something on a store or anything like that knowing that there is a bug that prevents you from playing that game. Now, that's different from, let's say 2 years after the game is launched, somebody discovers some crazy bug that if you spin the mouse 5 times and click on a button, it crashes the game. That's not something somebody's going to find. But if you release the game knowing that there's a bug, or if someone finds out very early that there is a game-critical bug, you kind of have to make that right. Again, as a consumer, we have to play, or we go by the rules of the game. If the game says you can't run around shooting people, then you can't run around shooting people. It's, again, one of those very weird, philosophical points about what it means to play video games. But at the end of the day, though, if you are putting a price tag on a game, there has to be some measure of quality. There has to be, again, some kind of showing of respect to the consumer. What we were just saying during our Weird Games segment, with developers these days, or what we've been saying with these developers who are using misleading thumbnails for their games to try and bypass the AO rating. That's not respecting the consumer. Or when we talk about that developer, the Slaughtering Grounds, with those very low-budget games and stuff like that. like again, there's a difference between making a game to the best of your ability and it doesn't work, versus knowing that there are severe problems with your game and just putting it out there and hoping you can, snag somebody, with like like quack medicine, Doctor Anderson's miracle cure-all. Drink it, and all your problems will be fixed for $35.95.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. I would say, just as a matter of just developer expectations, especially in an arena as complex as PC, given the vast majority, like the increasingly large number of hardware combinations that are out there, just expect some random, disgustingly bad bug to appear, and plan accordingly. Just say, for the first month, I'm going to be in bug fixing mode, and there's nothing else I can do about it, and I shouldn't have any other time dedicated to anything else. Just fan management, like consumer management and bug fixing, should be your priority after launch, and just expect that. So if you decide that it's launched and you want to wash your hands of it, certainly once upon a time that was how you had to do it, but nowadays you can't. You can't avoid it.
Yep, and again, when we talk about post-release support, anything you add to the game could add in new bugs. And as you said earlier, there is no such thing as the 100% bug-free game. As a very, I'm not sure this would be considered ironic or just weird twist, more consumers are learning about that now thanks to speedrunners. Going back and playing all the classic games. So, many gamers, for the last 10 to 15 years are saying, oh, games suck today compared to old days. Nintendo games, they were bug free. First generation PC games had nothing wrong with it. And then the speedruns come, if you just move your character like this, the entire game breaks, and I win the game immediately.
Yeah. Yeah, people are weird. The internet finds everything. Yes. The internet knows all.
Let me see. I'm trying to think if there's anything else to say. Yeah, so with something like Cultist Simulator, again, the game is complete. You can play the game from start to finish. But it kind of reminds me of that whole idea of, when you see a game have placeholder art. If the art's not done, you have I think Slay the Spire had pictures of cats. Or some game I play cat drawings as placeholder art for everything in the game. And yeah, if you're playing a game on early access, or you're playing a beta or whatever, yeah, that's fine. But when it makes it into the full game, that just kind of seems like the wrong way. It seems like it's better to hide it than to, have it out there for people to find.
Yeah. Yeah, it's absolutely true. And it's not that hard. And I'm kind of speaking for developers here, but to hide an object, it shouldn't be that hard unless there's too many things tied to that object that's somehow critical to the rest of the game, even though for a player it's meaningless. It should not be that hard to just not have a card appear in your game. If you haven't planned to be able to hide and lock and unlock cards, I don't know. How do you test out new cards if you don't have that ability? So,
yeah. And again, it's that very weird thing between something like Cultist Simulator versus At the Gates. And I think, as you said earlier, another thing is the price. At the Gates is released at $30, while Cultist Simulator is, time for a quick little research, it was released at $20, so it's $10 less than At the Gates. And again, I think price is another big point. And I think this is, the final point, because I need to save my voice, and plus I'm running out of things to say, but it's something that we talked about a long time ago, when it came to this idea of, I guess, the AAA indie. And I know by saying those two words, I think Mike just had a small aneurysm by saying that. But it's an idea of of an independent developer basically trying to release a $30, $40 plus game. We could argue No Man's Sky was probably the first example of that. Because again, wasn't only a team of 5 or 10 people working on that originally? I forget how small that team was. From what's the name of the studio who did No Man's Sky?
Well, let's find out. I've forgotten everything I once knew about No Man's Sky.
No Man's Sky is still $60 right now.
$60, yep. And its original reviews are 50%, and then the more recent ones are 7%. So yeah, and yet, oh god, it's just every time I think about like how did they get away with this? Those bastards.
But yeah, like this idea that an independent team can go all in. Like I'm talking about releasing a $50 to $60 game. Like, is that possible? And can or should you even do that? As you said earlier, Rob, that one of the benefits of working at AAA studios is that you have a lot of resources. You know, it's not just one person doing art in that game. They have entire teams dedicated to different aspects of the art of that game. You have different programmers, designers. You know, it's not one person. I mean, hell, I can't even imagine a AAA game designed by one person. That probably wouldn't happen. So they can,
not these days.
Yeah. So they can do everything they want and build a very polished game. And this is again why when we talk about $50 to $60 games, you better make sure there aren't any game crippling bugs in that. For those of you who've somehow forgotten this, there was the whole debacle over Arkham Knight when it came out for the PC, and how it was almost unplayable for a lot of people. And again, if you're spending $50 to $60 on a game, it better have everything in it that was promised, or you're going to piss off a lot of people. And again, back to the point though, when we start talking about independent developers getting to $30, $40, $50, and because here's the question for you, Rob, and for everybody else. Can an independent developer, do you think, could release a game with $40 to $50 of value in it?
Theoretically. I mean, it's possible. And just real quick for Mike, the only reason I say they got away with it, they were allowed to keep working on it. It's a gorgeous looking game, and I can't imagine not enjoying it if I played it. Like, it's not that it's bad, it's just that they launched and did not launch the right way, at least in my opinion, and somehow managed to make it fantastic and fulfill all their promises after, when in the past they never would have had that chance. They would have died right off the bat. But yeah, I don't know how one person could make that kind of a game without just being like brilliant. They don't even have to be an artist. They could buy all their art, whatever, somehow make an amazing title. I mean, there's enough tools out there to do it and make something look great and play great and sound great, but boy, that would be hard. That would be hard.
Yeah. Like we talked about with something like We Happy Few. That started as an independent game, and it was going to be released for, I think, $30 or $40. And then that got bumped up to $60 when Gearbox decided to publish it. But
what's the status of that?
It is still being sold. It looks like it has mixed reviews right now. But yeah, when I played that, I did not see $60 of content in that game.
Yeah.
Like, and we were talking about this on either a stream or on the Discord channel. Something like Owlboy. That game had 10 years of on and off development, and a lot of people don't think that it shows. And this is the weird point. I know I keep saying my final thought, and that again, take a drink every time I say that, and everyone will be drunk by the end of the stream. But like, people will only see the end of the game. They don't see how long it took. They don't see what was taken away. They can only see what is that end product. And if that end product is not up to their standards based on the price that you set, people are going to feel like they've been cheated.
Yeah. And Mike, you just hit another one of my button topics. That like big companies trying to act like indies. Like, oh man, boy, I'm gonna have nightmares tonight. But
between my AAA indie, I think Mike's gonna probably have a hard drink after this stream is over.
Yeah, I've run into too many companies that are too big and they call themselves indies. I'm just like, wow, that does not make sense. Does not compute.
Or how about, you're gonna love this then. Did you hear the news about, like, one of the former Hearthstone designers started his own indie company with, I think, like a $5 to $10 million donation or $5 to $10 million investment by Tencent.
That's ridiculous. Yeah, I mean, certainly you can be one person making a project. If you have a $5 million budget, I don't know why you're still just one person making a project. Yeah, as soon as you have more than like a team of 5, and as soon as you're not working out of like a very poorly furnished apartment,
yeah,
I don't know. I've got a very specific idea in mind of what an indie studio is, but I mean that particular point is arguable. But I feel like once you hit that 7-digit number in terms of your budget, you're beyond that point.
And I would say if you have a Chinese investor giving you millions of dollars, that kind of removes the indie tag as well.
Yeah, 10 cents not exactly small time.
Yeah. Let's see. Anything else? I know I like to keep saying that. I think that is, yeah, that's true as well, Board Fan. That's a topic probably for another day. I could go on like 5 more different rants, but again, I need to save my voice. So, Rob, do you have anything to take us out with?
Oh gosh, take it. I don't. I basically I agree with all that stuff. I feel like the indie terminology is a whole cast unto itself. So maybe we save that for another day.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, while this cast is coming to an end, for you folks watching live, I'm not done for today. I'm going to see if I can push that other cast back to maybe 6:30, 6:45, so I can hopefully drink about 5 more bottles of water here to get my voice back. But we'll be back, of course, for a game stream at some point tonight where I'll die even more. And Rob and I will be back next week, probably around 3:30 again EDT. Oh, and Friday is my birthday. I think last time it fell on a Sunday. So, I guess I'll have post-birthday talk for next week. We'll see how that goes, Rob.
Sounds good.
All right, and for everybody watching, if you'd like to get an ad-free and uncut version of this stream, be sure to check out patreon.com/YoBuBicer. And remember, the book acknowledgement reward is only going to be good until the end of February. Anyone who donates at least $25 or more will get acknowledged in my second book. And I have a special reward thinking about with the idea of a Josh box coming up soon. So I'll be announcing that as things get further along. So,
the long-awaited Josh box.
Yes. But until next time, be sure to check back for daily discussions on game design here and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. But until our next stream, have a great night, everybody.